Okay, we'll go ahead and start now with recording. The first thing I wanted to share with you again is to remind you to do the food handler serve safe. It's an hour-and-a-half course, and then at the end you get a certificate. I decided I should participate as well. So last night, late afternoon, I started it. There are 5 sections to it. It does get to be kind of long. So after the first 3 sessions, I paused it and took a little break with it. Good morning, William. I see you just popped on. We just started. The course itself is about an hour and 40 minutes or so. And then the test is 45 questions, and then at the end it'll tell you if you pass or failed. And I passed with getting 2 wrong. So I'll just tell you, make sure you pay attention to temperatures, because it asks about the water temperature and different temperatures of meats when it's in the danger zone or not in the danger zone. But a lot of it was pretty easy. And then at the end you can print the certificate. I'm going to offer an incentive, and I'm going to put this on the updates as well. This is free through April 30th. So you have that page in Schoology where you can go on and go to the link and you create an account with your name, address, and etc. Then you can watch it. Like I said, you could watch one session today, one tomorrow. You can do it at your own pace because you can resume. Then when you're done, you take a picture of it. If you don't have a printer, you could just take a picture of it on your phone or iPad. Send it to me via email or Schoology. Then I'm going to put everybody's name into a drawing for a $20 gift card to some food place. So whether we come back I'll probably draw May 1st or 2nd. If we come back to school May 4th or sometime in May, then I can give it to you. Otherwise, I can just mail it to you. So I thought that was an easier thing to do. So I'm really encouraging you to get it. Once you get it, I noticed that it has 3 years, and then you'd have to do it again. But then, of course, you'd have to pay for it. So right now, it's free, which would usually cost you about $150. So that's why it's such a good thing. That's why I decided I have my serve safe, but this is a little bit different. So I thought I might as well try it and see what it's like. And that way, if you guys had questions too. So that's the first thing. The second thing we're going to talk about is the recipes. And I'm going to make this bigger, and that way we can talk through the recipes and can see them just a little bit better on your screen. Friday is the designated lab day. However, you have a week to do them, because I know that some of you can't just do it the day we have it. You might not have the ingredients, you might have other responsibilities, etc. to do it. So you can do one or both of the recipes. If we were in class, we'd do we'd do both of these, but I'm saying to do one, and it doesn't have to be my fruit cooler smoothie recipe. There's lots of different smoothies that I know that you enjoy yourself. So go ahead and do whatever you prefer. If you do this recipe, it makes a whole blender like almost to the top, because obviously we'd make it in class and you'd share it with 5 people in your group. So you might want to, if you decide to do this, you might want to cut it in half, depending on how many people are going to actually have your smoothie. So I'm just going to go through both recipes, and then I'll ask you if you have any questions on them. So the first one, the fruit coolers, the smoothie, is 1.5 cups of orange juice, so 1 full cup and a half cup. And that could be fresh orange juice, or you could squeeze it, you could, frozen and make it, whatever works. 1/4 cup of pineapple juice. And so both of these are liquid measuring, so you'd use your liquid or glass plastic liquid measuring cup. There's a 16-ounce bag of unsweetened strawberries, and you can get them sweetened as well. Then you would need to add this half cup of white sugar. If they're unsweetened, you're probably going to want sugar. Sometimes when we make it in class, some of the groups won't add as much sugar. I think you need a half a cup if you're going to do this full batch, but you can decide. You can taste it and decide if you think it's sweet enough. And there's 1.5 cups of crushed ice. Some of you are able to crush your ice in your blender if you have a really industrial type blender. At school, if we usually have a table designated with hammers and mallets where you actually crush it, because we don't have the high industrial that will take some of those larger cubes of ice. So crush up your ice and then add your ingredients. And I noticed when I copy and pasted, place in the blender, mix together. Puree is usually the button. That's usually about the third. So if you have numbers, I would say like 3 or 4 on your blender would be what you'd use. I'm going to come back here for a second. Does anybody have any questions on the fruit cooler recipe? Okay, we'll go on to the pizza bubble bread if you decide you're going to make this and not do a smoothie, or if you want to make them both, or down the road maybe. It's a very simple recipe. We just do cheese, but it's like any other pizza. You could have multiple toppings. You know, you could put pepperoni and mushrooms or olives or whatever. So it is 1 package of refrigerator biscuits. Those are the ones, if you're familiar with, in the tubes. You can get regular like biscuits. You can get buttermilk biscuits. Any of those kind of biscuits will work. Home style biscuits. There's lots of varieties. Half a cup of pizza sauce. And somebody last hour asked about pizza sauce because they didn't have it at home. But if you have tomato sauce, where you could add garlic, basil, oregano, you could make your own pizza sauce with your own spices. A cup of shredded mozzarella cheese, and again, you could use other cheeses. You could put more than one cheese on. That's totally up to you. But that's it for ingredients, which is kind of nice, not a lot. Preheat your oven to 400 degrees because we know that pizza is a little bit hotter than like next week when we do cookies at usually 350, 375. Pizzas are 400 to 425, 450. Spray your pizza pan, and you could use a cookie sheet if you don't have a pizza pan. You could use a cake pan if you wanted to, whatever pan you have at home. So you separate your biscuits. There's 10 biscuits in the tube. You cut each biscuit into 4 pieces. So that means you take your biscuit, cut it in half, and cut it in half again. Place it in a medium bowl and toss with the sauce. So you just pick up the bowl and toss it, or obviously you could take a spoon and mix it. Arrange the biscuit dough pieces into an 8-inch circle. And really that arrange word I should take out of there. You don't have to sit and take piece by piece. What I do is I just take my bowl and I dump it into the middle of my pizza pan. Then I sprinkle it with cheese, put it in my oven. It takes about 14, sometimes maybe a minute or 2 longer to get those middle biscuits done. And then you can also lift it up with a spatula to check the bottom to see if it's golden brown. You'll notice I put steps because it's one of our first recipes. So it is our first recipe. Usually in a recipe, they'll put it into a paragraph form. Sometimes they will give you steps like this. It's just a little bit easier in a regular recipe, and those of you that have done some baking and cooking know that it's paragraph usually, and you read a sentence, you stop, and you do that. And usually they list the ingredients in order of use. So like when we do cookies next week, the first ingredients in the bowl will go in the order of the recipe, if that makes sense. Okay, let's come back. Does anybody have questions on that recipe? All right. Then I wanted to talk about the nutrients and their functions because tomorrow you are doing a nutrition chart. And just a little bit about the chart. If you haven't looked at it, some of you have completed it already. That's how awesome you guys have been keeping up. But in the first column, it's going to ask you to put the function. I've given most of those in the notes, and if I haven't published the nutrients and their functions, I'll make sure I do that today. So the first column would be, what is the function of the nutrient? Then you'll notice the next column I've X'd out. It's got deficiencies listed, and I've already typed in the ones you need to know. It doesn't mean that the other ones don't have deficiencies, and by the way, a deficiency means if you lack that nutrient. What could happen? What kind of illness or sickness, disease could you get? And then the next column will say 2 foods that have that nutrient. I'll say 2 food sources. So you want to list 2 foods that have that nutrient. And then you look at those 2 foods in the last column and where do they belong on my plate? And most of you watched the My Plate video yesterday and completed that worksheet. So let's just do the carbohydrates as the first one on the chart. So you would write supplies energy, as you can see on the notes that's the function of it. Then you go across and you'd list 2 foods, and I said last hour pasta and potatoes. Carbohydrates are your sugar, starches, and fibers. So then I would go to my next column where it says my plate, and where does pasta belong? It's in the grains group. So I'd write grains, and then where does potatoes belong? Vegetables. So I'd write grains, comma, vegetables. Sometimes you might only have one place on my plate, and sometimes you'll have 2. Like if I would have said pasta and rice, I would only have had to write grains. I'm going to come back. Does that make sense to everybody? Does anybody have questions on the chart? So it's function, 2 foods that have that source, and then where do they belong on my plate? Does anybody have questions on that? Does that make sense to you? If not, go ahead and ask, because sometimes it's harder to explain it when I can't be in front of you. I'm trying to explain it as best as I can. Okay, great. Makes sense. All right. So let's talk about the nutrients and their functions. We mentioned already carbohydrates, minerals, and as you know, those of you that have been in health science, I only gave you 3 minerals: fluoride, calcium, and iron. We know that there's many, many more. There's some on your chart that are trace minerals, like iodine is, for example, one. I did also put, I took pictures of different pages from the nutrition chapters in our book, so you'll have some other sources to find answers. Like there's charts that have the nutrients, like they might say vitamin A, and they'll have a whole bunch of foods that have vitamin A. Or obviously you can Google that too, but either source, that's why I gave you those pages to help you with finding answers. So fluoride, you need for strong teeth. And you'll notice on the chart that I've X'd out food and my plate for fluoride, because most of the time your toothpaste, fluoridated water, mouthwash would be where you'd find fluoride. Calcium is needed for strong bones and teeth. Many of your things that would be in the dairy group of my plate would have calcium. Although we know from watching my plate there are some other calcium-rich foods. Iron carries oxygen in your blood. A lack of iron causes anemia. You might have heard somebody say they're anemic. If somebody's anemic, they have their red blood cell count is low, so they're probably feeling tired, lethargic, weak, and then the doctor will say, you need to have more iron in your diet, so they might have leafy greens, red meats. I don't know if anybody likes liver. It's not usually a popular one, but it's very high in iron. Spinach would be one of your greens that would be high. Fats is another nutrient.